This presentation will be about a review of observation for the past few decades of the effects of sea level rise. So one key message from the previous presentation was that coastal morphological changes are due to multiple parameters acting at multiple time and space scales. So now we question how important is contemporary sea level rise in causing shoreline changes. So one first answer to this is it depends on time scales. So if you look at short-term time scales, like during storms, cyclones, and tsunami, so under the combined effect of higher sea level and waves, you can have some drastic changes in the shorelines. So these are just examples of, can you say, can you show me the, you have the pointer? Ah, merci. Yes, so here, for example, this is some example from the Xinjiang storm in 2010. And you had some retweets often by 2 to 5 meters, but sometimes up to 30 meters, 20 meters. And this was a storm during which we had sea levels exceeding the expected centennial events. So now, conversely, if you consider longer time scales, since the last glacial maximum, so we know that sea level rose by 120 meters from the last glacial maximum to 6,000 years from now. And this led to shoreline changes of several tens to 100 kilometers. So of course we are not so sure about what happened exactly, for example, in the Black Sea, but this gives a picture of the changes you can have. So sea level variation can cause shoreline changes at geological and events time scales. And now what about the impact of contemporary sea level rise? So the 20 centimeters of sea level rise since the late 19th century. So the expected consequences of this is that as sea level rises, waves reach higher elevations in the upper beach and generate erosions. So clearly, if there are no waves, there is just passive inundation of the system, and in fact, yes, you need waves to have to generate erosion. There was a study, let's start with a statement. There was a study in the 70s and the 80s, led under the auspices of the International Union of Geography. And the conclusion of this study was that, this was an international survey, that in addition to the erosion of erodible cliffs and of delta and swamps, 70% of the beaches are retreating. So, of course, there are a lot of difficulties with such a study because you have to collect a huge amount of local data, and shoreline changes are better known in some places, so probably it would be worth visiting this statement. But still, we have this figure which is very important for the community and which is repeated a lot. And we may wonder why shorelines are eroding since they are accumulation landforms. So there was one hypothesis said by Vellinga and Leathermans. They said that since erosion is a global process, there must be a global cause to this, and this can be sea level rise. But actually, many coastal geographers and coastal engineers would agree with the second statement here, is that shoreline are mostly eroding because of shortage in coastal sediments for many reasons. So now let's look at what approach do we have for assessing the impact of sea level rise on shoreline changes. The first thing we would like to do would be to attribute part of the shoreline mobility to sea level rise. And this requires a comparison of shoreline changes observations to a model. However, the only model we have is this model called the Brown rule, which predicts shoreline erosion in response to a certain sea level. And this model assumes that this profile is the same, but it migrates landwards as sea level rises. And basically, it says that the sediments from the beach are migrate to the submarine beach up to a certain closer depth. So beyond the closer depths, neither wave nor currents can move the sediments. But this Brown rule is highly simplistic, in fact, and many people have tried to validate it. In practice, it's very difficult to validate it. Possibly, it's too simplified for the process we have. And so, in any case, it's not accurate enough for attribution studies. So we cannot attribute part of the shoreline mobility to sea level rise. But we may detect some consequences, so analyzing if a signal due to sea level rise can be identified in shoreline changes observations. So the principle of the detection studies are the following. We use the fact that sea level has not risen uniformly in the past. We consider coastal sites where sea level has deviated from the global average due to any reasons. This can be climate, GIA, local subsidence. And we question if the probability of erosion is higher when sea level is rising faster. So one first study that followed this approach, in fact, this was a pioneering study, Tsang et al. In 2004. So used the large and consistent database of shoreline data along the eastern coast of USA. So you can see here this database. Here it means red means erosion, yellow stable, and you have some blue place where you have accretion. And they also have a long and relatively dense tide gauge records. Along this coast, there are different rates of sea level rise during the 20th century. So it is GIA-induced subsidence. You may remember from the slide from this morning from Edouard Barr and Giorgio Spada. Here you had ice sheet over Canada, but here it was, since when the ice sheet is removed, land is subsiding in response to the removal of the ice sheet. And this led to subsidence. Here, this is the measurements of tide gauge of up to 4 millimeters per year. Sorry, the subsidence is 2 millimeters per year, so the relative sea level rise is 4 millimeters per year in this area here in Shakespeare Bay. And by the way, you have here one of the unique examples of a community being removed, being displaced because of the effect of sea level changes. So it's not climate-induced, but still in the early 20th century, there was 300 inhabitants at that period on this island. And as the island was becoming more exposed to storms, to marine intrusions, and so on, the inhabitants decided to go away. And the last house was destroyed in 2010. So this is a study by Gemans and Nichols. Well, so, however, this dataset suggests that there is a relation between subsidence and erosion, because you can see that here we are subsiding and there is a lot of erosion. At this step, you must think that, yes, of course, but this shoreline is affected by longshore transport. So, Tsang et al. Considered this problem, and they were considering coastal systems, geomorphologic units, affected by similar factors, except sea level rise. So this dataset suggests a relationship between the rate of sea level rise and shoreline changes, and the sea level rise involved are GIA-induced, so they are in this order of growth at tide gauge, and the relative sea level is dropping since several thousand years. So it could be either fortuitous, or it could be, because it could be just a coincidence, or we may find other similar relationship in other sites. So let's look now at European shoreline changes. We have a similar database. So this has been collected by the European Environmental Agency for, actually it was more for management purposes, it was not for research. You can see in blue accreting shorelines, green is stable and red is eroding. This is a quantified statement of the changes in Europe. So you can see from this database that 40% of the European beaches are in erosion, 50% of French coastal wetlands are accreting, which can be a problem as well. And sure, there are a lot of limitations. It would be worth updating this database, but still, if you are looking for a quantified statement of European scale, you have this database which can be used. So we can explore. Let's explore the content of this coastal database. So we use a simple statistical model, not considering artificialized coasts. So this model calculates the probability of being in erosion, knowing the lithology, geomorphology, sea level changes, wave climates, and tidal ranges. And this very simple model is able to reproduce 65% of the observations. We can also, we have statistical indicators which help us to evaluate the relative importance of the variables. So for example, here geomorphology, like a beach, cliff, etc., is the most important one, as expected. But the second most important one is sea level changes. So there are a lot of limitations in this approach, of course. We have a restrictive consideration of forcing factors, and we just find statistical relationships. But still, we can explain why sea level changes are important. It's because here we have Scandinavian coast uplifting and mostly aquitting. If we look at this very simple model, its regional performance, we can see that yellow means the model is correct, green it's too accretive, and red it's too erosive. So the model is basically quite good for uplifting coasts and for cliffs, but it's much worse, for example, in beaches, for beaches. And let's focus now on Aquitaine coast here. So the model is bad in this region, but we can understand why. It's because of a process called longshore sediment transport. So when you have oblique waves coming to the coast, these waves generate longshore currents, which set sand in motion, and you have a resulting longshore drift. And since coastlines are curved, this creates longshore gradients, and these sediment fluxes can cause shoreline changes. And this, of course, is not taken into account in our simple models, which explains why the model was so bad here. Coming back to Aquitaine, so this is the coast of Aquitaine, and we may explain part of the shoreline variability by shoreline gradients of sediment fluxes. So these are calculations of longshore gradients of sediment fluxes using a very simple formula. And there is a relatively good agreement, at least, let's say, fair agreement, between the observation here and the model. Except in some locations like here, but we know that these places there are a lot of coastal defenses. So longshore gradients could explain part of the spatial variability of shoreline changes in Aquitaine, although we are very cautious saying that because we have very few knowledge of the coastal cross-shore processes. So conclusion on the European shorelines. Possibly we have detected a signal due to sea level changes. There are many limitations. And again, this is a GIA-related effect. Now let's focus on Pacific Atoll Island. So there is concerns about atoll sustainability due to sea level rise. And sea level has risen more than the global average over the last 60 years. This is a study from Becker et al. In the Center Pacific. But shoreline changes are very poorly known in this region. There is no coastal database. So therefore, there has been a lot of study recently dedicated to the investigations of the causes of atoll shoreline changes. So each of these studies was using aerial photographs, which have been taken since the 50s, and satellite images to monitor the shoreline changes. And each of these studies was considering a few atolls, so you can see here, which is but altogether this is still very few compared to the number of atolls you have in the Pacific. Just in French Polynesia there are 83 atolls. So we can say that shoreline changes are still poorly known in this region. So focusing on French Polynesia, we have knowledge of regional ground motion from previous studies undertaken in the 80s. Yes, this was they used the footmarks of the high sea level still stand from the 4,000 K years ago. And we have also sea level reconstruction, which fortunately agree quite a lot in this region. So we can have estimation of relative sea level even if we don't have many tide gauge in this region. So this is an atoll in the Tuamotus. Tuamotus are located, Tuamotus are the atoll located here, whereas the Society Islands are here. These are high islands with some atolls, and these are atolls. Sorry, voilà. So we focus on Mani now. Mani is an atoll in the Tuamotus. We can see a lot of variability in shoreline changes, and sea level rise rates are about 2.4 millimeters per year. Of course, in this atoll, there are two motus, which are located here, which are highly anthropogenized, and the shoreline change here are very clear. This is the extension of the island, of the village, and of the airport. Let's look now on other atoll. It's almost inhabited very infrequently. Sea level rise is comparable, and this atoll is mostly in erosion, and you can see the variability. So we have, in these two atolls, we have a similar rate of sea level changes, but completely different hydrosedimentary behavior, with one mostly accreting, the other one mostly eroding. So the observations, whatever the atoll you consider, from the previous study I have quoted, all these studies show that there is a contrasting behavior of islet. It can be islet extension, lagoonward migration, oceanward migration, islet erosion. So all these studies together question the common opinion that shorelines are always eroding when sea level is rising. In fact, if we look at the reason why shorelines are changing when they are not anthropogenized, we have a nice example here of the effects of cyclones in Tupai Atoll in the Society Island. So in fact, this atoll was eroding, its eastern part was eroding during this period, while the other side of the atoll was accreting. And by the way, the ionic cyclone affecting this atoll generated waves. You can see the waves here. Colors are the height, so this is up to 7 meters, and arrow shows the direction of the waves. The waves originated from the cyclone, originated from the east. Of course, the cyclone is moving, but this is a general pattern. Then you have a second period during which we observe that the atoll is retreating here and it's recovering on this side. And we have 3 cyclones affecting it during this period. So therefore, there is a high agreement between this comes from a model of cyclonic waves. So there is a high agreement between these cyclonic waves modeling and the observed changes in this atoll. In other atolls, this may be different. This may be due to lagoon flushing, to other things. But still, we can see that waves play a very important role. So now, last study about the atoll, which was published very recently by Ford. So they monitored the shoreline changes in an atoll called Voce in the Western Pacific. And what they found was that from 1945 to 1975, the atoll surface gained. Then it remained almost stable, and then it retreated. So this suggests that there is a shift toward erosion in recent years. Sorry. So we can question why. So there are 3 possibilities. This could be part of the transition toward island erosion. This could be part of the inherent shoreline dynamism, or this could be just a sampling issue because we have very few data before the 90s. So this shows that when doing such studies, one of the limitations we have is that we have very few knowledge of the. We have very few. We have not the relevant. Okay, we would need more data. In fact, temporal. We have not the required temporal resolution for monitoring all the inherent shoreline dynamism. So conclusion about Pacific Atoll Island. Many observations suggest that the variability of shoreline changes is presently dominated by waves, currents, and human impacts. But there are too few observations of shoreline changes to draw any definitive conclusion. I think this is very important. And here, the rates of sea level rise involved in the studies I mentioned was from 2 to 6 millimeters per year. We use the sea level reconstruction here because we don't have enough tide gauge. So delta and estuaries, there will be a presentation tomorrow on deltas. There are commonly observed changes, which are sedimentary distributions due to tide, waves, land use in the watersheds, for example, like damming and reduce of sediment transport. Of course, delta may be affected by subsidence depending on geological context and human activities. And of course, water and coastal management is very important, like dikes and so on. So we have very contrasted behaviors in deltas. Very shortly, I just mentioned a study here by Sherman et al. They showed that using remote sensing images, well, in the Ganges and Brahmaputra, you have a retreat of the shorelines, and it's most probably due to the reduction of sediment transport. These delta are slightly accreting. But these ones, for example, here are retreating, and they couldn't find any reason for that, because they expected, actually, given the knowledge of the human impacts, that these human impacts would release more sediments and would make this delta accrete. So in these studies, they suggest that the flight data could be affected by sea level rise, and this could be the reason why it is retreating. So let's summarize what we have found in the previous studies. So whatever the region we considered, we can find that sediments redistribution are very important. The effects of human actions are very important as well as storms. But with respect to the the present day sea level rise, it's much more difficult. So it's clear that it depends on local subsidence, but local subsidence are often unknown. And in the case of Europe and USA, we found a statistical relationship, and it is, but the sea level rise involved was due to GIA effects. Okay, so to the question, are we able to observe the actual impact of climate-induced sea level rise? The response is relatively clear. We are not able to detect them presently. But we cannot draw any definitive conclusion because we don't have enough data, and particularly shoreline data, to conclude. So one consequence of this is that assessing the future effects of sea level rise is very difficult. So we know more or less the expected impacts. These are increased erosion, more frequent marine flooding, saline intrusion in coastal aquifers. But we don't have nor model nor observations to really quantify these. And therefore, the quantified estimates of the effect of sea level rise are either poorly quantified or they suffer from a lot of uncertainties. But we have some alternatives to quantify statements. So this is one of the alternatives we have. This is a study which we did for the Ministry of Environment. They required to map the hotspots of erosion, let's say, in coastal flooding in the context of climate change in a few regions in France, and here this is Languedoc-Roussillon. And yes, we can do that because we know that, for example, beaches are the most vulnerable, tidal inlets are very vulnerable, and so we know, for example, that here this is an industrial area on a on some spits. Clearly, these are places where something should happen under sea level rise. Okay, conclusion. Sea level changes are an important driver of coastal changes, that for sure. But the actual impacts of recent climate-induced sea level rise are unclear. And for this, we have too limited knowledge of sea level rise at the coast, including of ground motion. And we have also too few knowledge of the cross-shore coastal morphodynamic processes, so cross-shore are perpendicular to the shoreline. And we have too few knowledge of shoreline changes. But still, we can do, I think we can do several things to better understand the relation between sea level rise and coastal erosion. So the first thing, and maybe the easiest to do, would be to increase our knowledge of sea level changes at the coast. And we can use, for example, in the past, many of the studies I quoted before were using tide gauge, and there was a strong assumption, which was that sea level at the tide gauge can be extrapolated regionally, which is often not the case. And here, for example, just an example of what we can obtain by INSAR. This is a study by Chaussard et al. In 2013. This shows that provided we have enough data, we can map the regional land motions affecting, for example, here this is the example of Java in Indonesia. And what they show is that here this is groundwater extraction, either in industrial area or in agricultural area. Do I have some time left or not? Yes? So I can show this one. This is an example in Manila. So just to show you that, so this is also an INSAR study. In Manila, we have a lot of groundwater pumping. And this is the subsidence, in red is subsidence, from 1993 to 1998. And you can see here that you have a subsidence, but if you consider the next period from 2003 to 2010, you can see that subsidence has completely different pattern just because groundwater extraction is not at the same place. And by the way, there is a tide gauge here which is affected by this ground motion. But still, it shows that ground motion are generally, at least when it's related to groundwater pumping, it's not predictable and it can be huge. This is up to tens of centimeters per year. So the second, coming back to, so the first thing we can do is improving sea level rise, knowledge of sea level rise at the coast. The second thing we can do is monitoring shoreline changes at different spice scales, like regional to local. So this is important to have coastal observatories to do that. We can share and save existing coastal datasets, because many of the datasets we are using are paper photographs, which we should actually save now because they are getting old, and so we may lose the knowledge of past shoreline changes. And of course, we may there are a lot of recent developments in improving coastal modeling capabilities. So thank you for your attention.